we want to improve cooking stoves to empower women and curb deforestation in Benin. So this is my outline. We are going to talk about the context, the research project, methodology, and then descriptive statistics, and then expected policy implications. So climatic change is of great concern to the Benin government, and they want to be able to come up with the objectives to counter this problem.
Oui, oui, on vous entend.
OK, d'accord.
Vous pouvez afficher vos slides en gros.
Could you please put up the slides for the present? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's good. So I was saying that the government's will is very clearly defined to fight against deforestation through government structures, through communities, civil society. In Benin, firewood is one of the issues that are accelerating deforestation, and climatic change is also contributing to this negative impact. And we want to respect government's commitments to deforestation. We want to be able to have 70,000 hectares of forest every year that are lost. We want to be able to curb that. And most of those who are involved in this are women. That is, they're also involved. It has impact on health and on the economy. So we want to have improved stoves at the local and level. So we have an improved stove which is produced in Benin, and we can use we can also use greenhouse gases and produce electricity. There is very little evidence on this technology, and the evidence that we have, or the data that we have in the rural areas, will not be able to permit policy makers to decide, because of the way in which it is the technology is implemented, and they do not know what handicaps there are. So that we want to enable the government to use data as a basis for coming up with policies, and also adapt and to promote this technology on a wider scale. And through this project, we are going to fill this gap, and we are going to, first of all, to look into the possibility of using this stove that is produced locally in Benin to empower women and also curb deforestation. And we are going to be able to give to policymakers data from research, so that they can come up with the policies that are effective. No, the research seeks to fill the gap, data gap, that there is in Benin, and to answer the following questions. to what extent the use of improved cooking stove by rural women could contribute to curbing deforestation and empowering women. So this is our general objective, is to explore the possibility of impact of using improved cooking stove, in particular web stove, and on women empowerment and deforestation, So as possible determinants, we could look at women's economic activities, the use of traditional stoves by women, and the daily cooking time, daily firewood collecting time, daily firewood consumption. Now, the objective is to estimate what would have been the situation of women and the level of deforestation by adopting the technology of Gave stove. And if the women had not chosen this technology, what would be the outcome? So we want to look at cooking efficiency, wood savings, and energy expenditure. To measure this, we are going to use a simple approach as a causal activity between the Gave technology and the results. We have the problem of selection. This study, when we use instrumental method as a strategy to avoid the bias. So two treatments will be used. Treatment one, a combination of improved cooking stoves and then training. And treatment two is which is the same as treatment one in all aspects except for the provision of Gave stones. The women are not going to get this stove. And then the third group will be a pure control group. So after this, we are going to compare the means, and we want to compare the average of the outcome. We shall compare group 1 and group 2. So this study, I'm sorry, I can't hear him. We are going to use household data. There is a lot of background noise. I cannot hear him. We look at women within the household in 2 districts of Benin, Glazoué and Wesse. These 2 districts were chosen with in conjunction with the policy makers, and we want to enable the government to better come up with a policy on the technology. If there is a positive impact, then they will be adopted. We do not have data already, so we are going to collect primary data in these 2 districts, and we are going to look at minimum detectable effect set at 40%. So the level in the calculation of the size of the sample, women will be randomly distributed in each one of into each one of the groups. So, as I said, as far as the statistical description is concerned, we do not have any data to use. So we are going to, first of all, go to the selected sites to be able to collect the data. As far as the policy implications are concerned, we recommend the use of evidence to promote efficient ICS through the integration of scaling programs of ICS into the national budget. There should be a review of the policy. If the impact is positive, they should integrate or adopt this technology to promote women's empowerment and also control deforestation. We recommend that there should be a review of climate change policy and incorporate aspects of the role of women in climate mitigation. We should integrate factors that will target women. So my team is as below. There are members who we have a team leader, and then there are 3 researchers, and then we have substitute researchers or associated researchers, and therefore there's Bakari, who is going to discuss with the policy makers, and then he's going to come up with a policy brief, and he is going to collect data and analyze the data, and then Adka Abiola, who is going to take care of data collection. So there are members of the policy decision making, Mogazi, who will facilitate the implementation of what is recommended, and also facilitate strategic adoption of the. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. And so
for the discussants, we have
for
the first discussant is Abiba Jebari. Bonjour, Abiba. She's a PEP resource person. She is also currently an associate professor at Aix-Marseille University and a research fellow at CIRPI. Abiba?
Thank you. May I switch?
To French?
Well, I have a presentation, some slides. I can show them, or I can just talk.
Whatever you prefer.
Okay, so do I have the possibility to switch to share my screen?
Yeah. Voilà, merci.
So
yes, that's fine.
I think I'll do it in French because un value presented in French, if you don't mind. Donc, c'est le projet sur
This is the project on stoves and improved stoves and women. That is with the objective of improving the situation and also reducing deforestation. So my comments will dwell mainly on the scientific contribution, on the methodology, and I'll make some suggestions as far as literature review is concerned. So the objective is to determine impacts of improved stoves and then women's position. These are variables that are of a great importance, of great interest. There he has two treatments and then a control treatment where we are given these cook stoves free of charge, and then there is training. And as far as training is concerned, you are told how these stoves will help save time and also improve on your health. So there is therefore training. My first question has to do with the recommendations, as policy recommendations. What could come out of there? For example, the first treatment is more efficient than the second, and then the control group. That means that the government of Benin has to subsidize these stoves.
On est vraiment en train de se poser la question à deux marches différentes. Ce qu'on appelle la marche extensive, c'est-à-dire l'adoption, l'acquisition
the adoption and the buying of the cookers, and then a different and it seems like if you go the first way, then you need to be, this would be the intensive approach, the use of these cookers, that you would explain to the women why these cookers stoves are improved. But the second approach would be that to encourage the adoption. In other words, encourage them to buy these stoves. It's not clear for me exactly how these two approaches would it's not clear how these two approaches are going to be combined and what is the best way to go forward. It seems to me that the targeted population is actually women, but I don't quite see how woman empowerment fits into it, and it will be very interesting to perhaps clarify that. And then also the fact that there is a lot of literature on improved stoves, with specifically the concern that the long-term effects of, for example, smoke and so on and so forth. So this study is an original study. So the question is, what are the main contributions to knowledge that we can expect from it? And here, I think we can say clearly, as far as Benin is concerned, from the point of view of policy recommendations, there would be a contribution to be made. And I'm talking about the scientific contribution that the project would make. And I'm referring specifically to this publication that has been, perhaps you haven't read it. It came, I think, in 2021. It is a systematic review of the impact of this kind of technology And as I read this research project, it seems to me that your project could be interesting if you perhaps reviewed it a little bit along the lines that I have mentioned, that it could really be a very original contribution. First of all, when I look at your research question, is it gender sensitive, I ask? It could be done in different ways. As you mentioned, you could, for example, look at economies from the time perspective for women, assessing the impact on gender equity. But it could also be, you could also, if your objective were to perhaps assess the buying of these improved stoves, then so maybe you could then look at the obstacles within households which could limit the buying of the stoves, the level of training perhaps, or perhaps at the level of negotiation. And I saw, and I think there's a reference in literature. It wasn't dealing specifically with improved stoves, but it was looking at households and the issue of, it wasn't talking about acquisition, but rather the issue of negotiation within households. The other way in which it could really give a very original contribution would be if you emphasized in the different groups that you're dealing with, or in the different options about the improvement that could be made from the author perspective, and especially for those women who are offered training, for example. Are they going to have access to, if they want to buy these improved stoves, are they going to have access to them? And are there any loan, could their credit levels be improved so that they can buy these stoves? Or could they perhaps be allowed to do a free tryout, training them, telling them that perhaps they could actually give back the stoves if it was not satisfactory? This could increase the level of the acquisition. So I think the questions and the objective would be to look at the level of acquisition of the stove, and perhaps you could look at one approach by perhaps giving the stove free of charge. In another group, what you could do is perhaps that you could offer this, you could minimize the constraints from the offer side. And then what this document does is that in Sub-Saharan Africa, the impact of these improved stoves is smaller than in the other regions of the world. And one could ask oneself why. And what I'd like to suggest, or what they suggest, is that it is perhaps because the improved stoves that exist already are relatively rudimentary. They're very basic, and these but these new stoves can actually reserve energy. You can even charge your telephone on them. So we haven't really, this is not basic technology. So maybe one of the possible contributions would be perhaps that you compare the technology, the advanced technology, like the one that you talked about with the technology that exists, a more basic technology. So these are general ideas, but it is very important to see what your contribution would be from the scientific point of view. What it is that you're teaching us, considering that there are all these other publications that already exist on the subject of improved stoves. And so after some comments, I will send you my slides, and I really I'm going to perhaps emphasize one or two issues. What could be interesting in your study would be to perhaps have to think a little bit more about the data that you will use. So these data, they could be of two kinds. They could be data that come from surveys, the way in which people are going, or questionnaires, the way in which people are going to fill in questionnaires. They could also be more objective data. And it would be interesting to have objective data, because apart from the issue of selection, there are other ways of collecting data. Now, it's also important to have a general approach, a kind of general approach as to what cooking means to a woman, for a woman. And especially in Senegal, there is a study that showed that even if it didn't have an impact on time, it didn't on time per unit, per time unit, it nevertheless was more effective by these stoves because they took the women much less time to actually prepare their dishes. And that at the end of the day, and I'm still coming back on the issue of the data, use qualitative data both at the level at the level of the pilot project too, so that you can begin to understand the way people behave vis-a-vis the issue of cooking, so understand whether women appreciate do they appreciate existing technology? Do they accept any? Do they appreciate future technologies? And it would also be important to understand what is the experience of is going to be the participants' experience, either at the last when you collect the qualitative data and try to understand why it worked or why perhaps it did not work. And as I was saying a short while ago, maybe in order to understand within the household what could be the obstacles that get in the way of acquiring these improved stoves. So I'm going to stop there, but I will share very happily the slides that I have with you. Thank you very much, Aniba.
The second discussant is Hossein Yegbeni. He's an assistant professor at the Faculté d'Agronomie, Université de Parakou, au Benin. He holds a PhD in agricultural economics and rural development from the University of Gießen in Germany. He has published in leading journals such as Land Use Policy, Agronomy for Sustainable Development, Climate Risk and Management, Climate and Development, Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews, Agricultural Systems and Outlook on Agriculture. Hossein?
Yes, Dominic, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Abiba, for your comments. I will just follow up in English as well. I think most of my comments somehow have been covered. So switching to, I will follow up rather in French. Je crois, j'ai lu la version du papier qui a été proposé. Je crois dans
so
la...
I read the original document and I looked at the presentation, and I think there have been already a number of improvements. I'm going to make my presentation. I'm not going to come back to the importance of the subject, the importance of the improved stoves and so on and so forth, but I'm going to begin by congratulating the team for the work that they have done so far. Now, as far as the scientific contribution is concerned, I believe that the team needs to work. They have to show their contribution of their work. There has been already a number of studies that have been undertaken on the impact of improved stoves, whether these whether the experimental studies and so there have been experimental studies that have been done even in Africa, in Senegal, in Ethiopia, and in other countries to show the impact of improved stoves. So it is very important that the team demonstrates the added value of the study that they are doing. And even for a country such as Benin, in which the study will be done, there are several improved stoves that have already been improved. The most known one are the Nansu stoves. That it would be good to actually tell us what we know about these stoves. What is the performance of these stoves, and why is it that they have not been adopted, and what is the opportunity? Why is it the opportune time now to be talking about a new kind of stove? It is important for the team to also emphasize the theoretical arguments that exist between introducing these stoves and the empowerment of women. So in the literature, these are some of the things that the team could look at. They should keep in mind, it is one thing to say that the time is ripe, but this does not mean that it's going to empower the women. So if there is an argument, it is an argument that needs to be demonstrated very clearly, the empowerment of women. Now, from the methodology point of view, my understanding is that the team will use a randomized trial and they will have a pilot study, and they're going to look at the efficiency, cooking efficiency. They're going to look at the saving of wood, energy expenditure, but there are some important aspects that they need to keep in mind. First of all, the presentation of the intervention that will be assessed, it is very, very limited. It is therefore very difficult to actually understand, to appreciate the methodology. For example, these stoves that you're talking about, do they already exist in the context? And if they do exist, where are they? Can people buy them, considering that in the rural areas, the people's budgets are very limited, and the people who in the treatment group, would they be able to afford these stoves even if they were interested? So there's a number of issues that need to be specified to make it possible for the reader to understand the firmness of the methodology. One of the issues is the issue of training. What kind of training are we talking about? How will the training be planned for? Will it be individual training? Will it be group training? And how will it be practically? And all of these considerations will have an impact on the methodology that you are going to use. Now, amongst your outcomes, I did not see any outcome that talked about the empowerment of women, and even less on deforestation, which are two ideas that kept coming in the project problem, in the research question. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind is that usually in the rural areas, the households sometimes adopt or accept an improved stove, but they don't use it full time for maybe some meals, or maybe depending on how many people are going to be fed. They definitely use those stoves, but sometimes they continue using the traditional stoves. So the time for using improved stoves will be something that you would look at the duration, and there are systematic reviews that are tried to highlight that consideration. Now, in terms of the samples, the conditions of eligibility, I think you need to give a little bit more detail. Is the region that you have selected, in that region, are these stoves already available? The different criteria for eligibility, I think you should be able to explain why you chose those criteria. And in terms of the size of your sample, I think you also need to talk about the numbers, but have very clear hypotheses that you will use for different analysis. Now, for the experimental design, it is not clear at what level you want to do the assignment. For example, will it be at the level of the village, the level of the household? It is not clear, and yet that would have very important implications. How are you going to analyze the effect, for example, of contamination, the issue of spillover, and so on and so forth? All of that needs to be discussed here, so that you can have you can enrich your methodology. How are you going to estimate the impact? You have said a few things on that, but I think it would be good to add these other arguments. I'm going to stop there, and of course, I'm more than happy to share my slides with the team. Thank you very much, and thank you very much.
So back to English. That's the end of this session. I want to thank everybody, the presenters, the discussants, for an excellent session. And I want now hand over us.
Thank you, Dominique, and on behalf of PEP, thank you very much to you and Carly to chair this session today. And of course, thank you to our mentors and all the team. Congratulations for the presentation. Just to tell you, tomorrow PMMA teams have their individual meetings with their mentors. So I will send you the details later today, especially the link to join the meeting. And if you have any question, please feel free to contact me by email. And thank you again, and have a good evening.